Abandoned goat finds friendship with orphaned calf. Their bond will move you. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. In the quiet countryside, nestled far away from bustling towns and city lights, lay a small farm surrounded by rolling hills and fields of green. It wasn't grand or particularly modern, but it held the charm of a place where time seemed to slow down. The air was always filled with the earthy smell of hay and the distant bleating of animals grazing contentedly in the fields. But while the farm appeared peaceful, its pastures were also home to stories of both hardship and hope, stories that often unfolded far from human eyes. This story began on a cool autumn morning when a young goat named Bella found herself alone in the corner of a quiet field. Bella had been born into a small herd of goats that roamed freely across the property. But something had gone terribly wrong. A few days earlier, the herd had been moved to another pasture, farther up the hill, where fresh grass was plentiful. In the chaos of the relocation, Bella, small, timid, and with an injured leg, had been left behind. At first, Bella cried for her mother, her bleats echoing through the empty field. She limped to the edge of the pasture, her small white body trembling as she called out, hoping someone would hear her. But the herd was too far away, and her cries went unanswered. The days that followed were difficult for Bella. Alone and frightened, she wandered the field in search of food and comfort, her injured legs slowing her down. She nibbled on patches of grass here and there, but the chill of the autumn nights crept into her bones, and her loneliness weighed heavily on her. To make matters worse, predators often lurked on the edges of the farm. Foxes and stray dogs that prowled the night, searching for easy prey. Bella could sense their presence in the darkness, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. She would huddle beneath a small tree, her heart racing with fear, and pray for morning to come. But despite the hardships, Bella refused to give up. She was small, but she was strong. Not far from where Bella roamed, another story was quietly unfolding. In a neighboring pasture, a small, orphaned calf named Charlie lay curled up beneath a broad oak tree. Charlie had lost his mother just days after he was born. She had fallen ill unexpectedly, and despite the farmer's best efforts to save her, she had passed away one rainy afternoon, leaving her calf alone in the world. The other cows in the pasture didn't pay much attention to Charlie. Though they were part of the same herd, they moved on with their daily routines, grazing and resting, seemingly indifferent to the small, brown calf who no longer had a mother to care for him. Charlie spent most of his time lying in the shade of the oak tree, his head resting on his front legs as he stared out at the world with wide, sad eyes. Without his mother to guide him, he felt lost. The farmer brought him milk in a bottle, and though Charlie drank it hungrily, it didn't fill the void in his heart. He missed the warmth of his mother's presence, the gentle nuzzles and soft sounds she had made to comfort him. Like Bella, Charlie was alone. It was a crisp morning when their two worlds first collided. The farmer, busy with chores, had left the gate between the two pastures slightly ajar. Bella, in her search for food and company, noticed the opening and limped her way through, her small body squeezing between the wooden posts. She found herself in a new field, larger and greener than the one she had come from. The cool morning air was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and birds chirping in the distance. Bella looked around cautiously, her ears twitching as she scanned for danger. But instead of predators or unfriendly animals, her eyes fell on something surprising. There, beneath the oak tree, lay Charlie. The calf lifted his head at the sound of Bella's hooves rustling the grass. His large, brown eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Bella froze, her heart pounding. She had never seen a creature like Charlie before. Large and brown with soft, floppy ears and a wet nose that glistened in the sunlight. Charlie, too, was puzzled. The little goat before him was unlike any of the other cows in the pasture. She was small and fragile, her thin legs trembling slightly as she stood there. But there was something about her, something that made Charlie's loneliness feel a little less heavy. Bella took a cautious step forward, her nose twitching as she sniffed the air. Charlie watched her curiously, his ears flicking as he let out a soft, low moo. Bella flinched at the sound, her injured leg wobbling beneath her. She stumbled slightly but quickly regained her balance, her eyes still locked on the calf. Charlie tilted his head, as though trying to make sense of this new creature. He let out another, quieter moo, this time more like a gentle hum. Bella's ears perked up at the sound, and she took another step forward, her limp still evident but her curiosity outweighing her fear. The distance between them grew smaller. Charlie slowly pushed himself to his feet, his movements careful and deliberate. He didn't want to startle Bella, who was watching him with wide, wary eyes. The two stood just a few feet apart now, their gazes locked as though silently communicating. For the first time in days, Bella didn't feel alone, and neither did Charlie. Their friendship didn't form all at once. At first, they were cautious, each unsure of what to make of the other. Bella would nibble on patches of grass near the oak tree, always keeping one eye on Charlie as he watched her with quiet curiosity. Charlie, in turn, would lie down near her, his massive frame still and unthreatening, as though trying to show her that he meant no harm. Over time, their trust began to grow. Bella discovered that Charlie wasn't dangerous. Despite his size, he moved gently, his presence soothing rather than intimidating. And Charlie found comfort in Bella's company, her quiet bleats and soft movements reminding him that he wasn't as alone as he had once believed. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Bella lay curled up beside the oak tree, her injured legs stretched out as she rested. Charlie, who had been grazing nearby, approached her carefully. He lowered himself onto the grass beside her, his body settling with a soft thud. Bella's ears twitched, but she didn't move away. Charlie let out a deep, contented sigh, his large head resting on the ground just inches from Bella. The little goat glanced at him, her eyes softening as she realized he was staying close to her. Not out of curiosity, but out of care. It was the first time in days that Bella had felt warm, safe, and unafraid. As the days turned into weeks, Bella and Charlie became inseparable. Wherever Bella went, Charlie followed, his large shadow trailing behind her like a gentle guardian. And wherever Charlie settled down to rest, Bella would curl up beside him, her small body nestled close to his for warmth and comfort. The farmer, who had noticed the bond forming between the two animals, watched them with a mix of surprise and admiration. He had seen friendships form between animals before, but there was something special about Bella and Charlie, something that seemed almost magical. "They're good for each other," he told his wife one evening as they stood by the fence, watching the goat and calf grazing together beneath the oak tree. "I think they needed someone to care for, and someone to care for them." His wife smiled softly, her eyes lingering on the two animals. Sometimes, the most unexpected friendships are the strongest ones. One chilly afternoon, a sudden storm rolled over the farm. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and the wind howled through the fields, sending leaves and branches flying. The other cows in the pasture huddled together for warmth, their bodies pressed close as the rain began to pour. But Bella and Charlie were nowhere to be seen. The farmer searched the pastures, his coat soaked through as he called out for the two friends. "Bella, Charlie." He finally found them beneath the oak tree, where they had taken shelter from the storm. Charlie stood tall, his large body shielding Bella from the rain and wind. The little goat huddled close to him, her head tucked beneath his chin as though seeking protection. The farmer stood still for a moment, his heart swelling at the sight. Despite the storm raging around them, Bella and Charlie were safe, because they had each other. And in that moment, the farmer realized something profound. Sometimes, family isn't about blood or species. Sometimes, family is simply about love. The storm continued to rage outside, but Bella and Charlie remained huddled together beneath the old oak tree. The wind whipped through the branches, rattling the leaves like whispered secrets, and rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking the ground around them. But even in the heart of the storm, there was an undeniable sense of peace. Charlie stood tall, his broad frame acting as a shield against the wind and rain. His brown fur was soaked, droplets rolling off his back and pooling at his hooves, but he didn't move. Bella, small and fragile, pressed herself closer to him, her white fur damp and trembling. She tucked her head beneath his chin, seeking warmth and protection in his presence. To anyone watching, it might have seemed odd. A goat and a calf standing side by side in the midst of a storm, their bond silent but unwavering. But for Bella and Charlie, it was instinct. Bella had been abandoned and injured, and Charlie had been orphaned. They were two souls who understood what it meant to be alone, and in finding each other, they had become a family. The farmer stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the pair from a distance. His coat flapped in the wind, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He had come to check on them, worried they might be caught in the storm. But as he watched Charlie stand guard over Bella, his heart swelled with admiration. "Would you look at that?" he murmured to himself, shaking his head in wonder. The little goats found herself a protector. His wife joined him a few minutes later, holding an umbrella that did little to keep her dry. "Did you find them?" she asked breathlessly, her cheeks flushed from the cold. The farmer pointed toward the oak tree, where Bella and Charlie stood together. "They're fine." The calves looking after her. His wife peered across the field, her expression softening as she spotted the two animals. "Well, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "They really have bonded, haven't they?" The farmer nodded. "They're inseparable. It's like they know they need each other." "Maybe they do," his wife said thoughtfully. "Sometimes animals understand things we don't. They see the world differently." The farmer smiled faintly, wiping rain from his face. "Maybe you're right." By the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world that felt fresh and new. The sun rose over the rolling hills, casting golden light across the fields. Puddles dotted the ground, reflecting the blue sky like scattered mirrors, and the air smelled of damp earth and rain-soaked grass. Bella and Charlie were still beneath the oak tree, curled up together in the soft grass. Charlie lay with his legs tucked beneath him, his head resting comfortably beside Bella, who was nestled against his side. The warmth of his body had kept her safe through the cold night, and as the sun rose, she stirred, her small ears twitching. Charlie lifted his head, his large brown eyes blinking sleepily as he glanced around. The pasture was quiet, the other cows grazing lazily in the distance. But Charlie didn't move. He stayed where he was, his gaze softening as he looked down at Bella. Bella yawned, her tiny mouth opening wide as she stretched her legs. When she noticed Charlie watching her, she let out a soft, happy bleat, as though thanking him for keeping her safe. Charlie responded with a low, contented hum, his nose nudging her gently. The farmer arrived a short while later, a bucket of fresh water in one hand and a bundle of hay in the other. "Morning, you two," he said warmly as he approached the oak tree. "Sleep well." Bella perked up at the sound of his voice, her tail wagging slightly as she limped toward him, still favoring her injured leg. Charlie followed close behind her, his broad shoulders towering over the small goat. The farmer chuckled, shaking his head as he set down the hay. "You're like her big brother, aren't you?" he said, patting Charlie's head affectionately. Looking after her like that, Charlie let out a low moo, as though agreeing with him. The farmer watched as Bella eagerly nibbled at the hay, her appetite returning after the long night. Charlie grazed beside her, his movements calm and deliberate. The two of them ate side by side, their bond unshakable. "Looks like you've got yourself a friend for life, Bella," the farmer said softly. As the weeks passed, Bella and Charlie became a familiar sight on the farm. Wherever Charlie went, Bella followed, her small figure limping determinately behind him. And wherever Bella stopped to rest, Charlie was never far away, his large presence a constant source of comfort and protection. The other animals on the farm began to take notice of their unusual friendship. The cows in Charlie's herd, who had once ignored the orphaned calf, began to show curiosity toward Bella. They would wander over to sniff her, their warm breath ruffling her fur as they inspected the little goat who had become Charlie's shadow. At first, Bella was nervous, She had spent so much time alone that the attention of the larger cows made her uneasy. But with Charlie by her side, she soon realized there was nothing to fear. The cows accepted her as part of their group, and Bella began to relax, her confidence growing day by day. The farmer, who watched the pair with a mix of pride and amusement, often joked that Bella was the honorary cow of the pasture. His wife, however, saw something deeper in their bond. They saved each other, she said one evening as they stood by the fence, watching Bella and Charlie graze beneath the setting sun. That little goat wouldn't have made it without him. And he needed her just as much. The farmer nodded, his gaze thoughtful. It's funny, isn't it? Two different animals, two different stories, and yet here they are. Family. His wife smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Sometimes family is about more than blood. It's about love and loyalty. The farmer couldn't argue with that. One afternoon, as the sun hung high in the sky, Bella and Charlie ventured to the far edge of the pasture, where a gentle stream wound its way through the grass. The water sparkled in the sunlight, its surface rippling as it flowed over smooth stones. Bella approached the stream cautiously, her injured leg making her steps uneven. She lowered her head to drink, the cool water soothing her parched throat. Charlie stood beside her, his broad frame casting a shadow over the small goat as he kept watch. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the quiet, coming from the line of trees that bordered the pasture. Charlie's ears flicked, his head turning sharply toward the noise. Bella, sensing his tension, froze in place, her heart pounding. From the shadows, a fox emerged. Its red fur gleamed in the sunlight, and its eyes locked onto Bella with predatory intent. The fox stepped closer, its movements silent and calculated as it crept toward the small goat. Bella bleated in fear, stumbling backward as her injured leg gave out beneath her. She fell to the ground, her body trembling as the fox drew nearer. But before the predator could get any closer, Charlie stepped forward. The young calf let out a deep, rumbling bellow that echoed across the pasture, his voice loud and commanding. He lowered his head, his stance wide and powerful as he placed himself between Bella and the fox. The fox froze, its eyes widening in surprise at the sight of the massive calf standing protectively over the goat. Charlie stomped his hooves against the ground, his bellow growing louder, as though daring the fox to come closer. The fox hesitated for a moment longer, its gaze shifting between the two animals. Then, with a final glance at Bella, it turned and darted back into the trees, disappearing into the shadows. Bella let out a shaky bleat, her body still trembling as Charlie turned to look at her. He nudged her gently with his nose, his deep hum soothing her fear. Bella lifted her head, her wide eyes meeting his, and for a moment, it was as though she understood exactly what he had done. Charlie had protected her, just as he always did. Bella pushed herself to her feet, leaning against Charlie's side for support. The two of them stood together by the stream, their bond stronger than ever. From the edge of the pasture, the farmer watched the scene unfold, his heart swelling with pride and awe. "Look at them," he said softly to his wife who had joined him. "That calf saved her life." His wife nodded, tears glistening in her eyes as she smiled. "He's not just her friend," she said. "He's her family." As the sun began to set that evening, Bella and Charlie slowly made their way back to their usual spot beneath the oak tree. The golden light painted the fields in soft hues of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Bella's injured leg still made her movements slow and uneven, but Charlie walked beside her, patient and steady, as though guiding her every step of the way. When they finally reached the tree, Bella let out a soft, tired bleat before settling into the grass. Charlie followed suit, lowering his large body to the ground with a heavy sigh. He stretched his legs out and turned his head to look at Bella, who had already nestled herself comfortably against his side. In that moment, the two of them looked more like siblings than a goat and a calf, two creatures who had found each other in the most unexpected way, their bond unshakable. The fear and loneliness that had once defined their lives had been replaced with something new: safety, comfort, and love. The farmer couldn't help but notice the change in Bella over the following weeks. Her limp, though still noticeable, had improved greatly thanks to the time she spent resting in Charlie's company. The little goat seemed stronger, her confidence growing with each passing day. She no longer wandered anxiously or cried out in fear. Instead, she spent her days exploring the pasture alongside Charlie, nibbling on fresh grass and occasionally daring to venture farther from the oak tree. Charlie, too, had changed. The once lonely and orphaned calf, who had spent so many days curled up beneath the tree, had found a purpose in caring for Bella. He seemed happier, his movements more spirited and playful. He would nudge Bella gently with his nose, urging her to keep up with him as he explored the pasture, and sometimes he would even break into a playful run, his large body bounding through the grass as Bella trotted clumsily behind him. The farmer's wife often watched them from the kitchen window, a smile tugging at her lips as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Those two are something else," she would say to her husband. "They're like two peas in a pod." The farmer would chuckle, shaking his head. "I've never seen anything like it. That calf treats her like she's his little sister." It was true. Charlie had become Bella's protector, her companion, and her family. And in return, Bella had given Charlie the one thing he had been missing since the day he lost his mother: a reason to feel needed. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the hills and bathed the fields in golden light, the farmer decided to check on Bella's leg. It had been several weeks since he had first noticed her injury, and he wanted to see how much progress she had made. "Come on, Bella," he called gently, kneeling down as he held out a handful of fresh hay. Bella perked up at the sound of his voice, her tail wagging as she limped toward him. Charlie followed close behind her, his watchful gaze never leaving her side. The farmer examined Bella's leg carefully, running his hands gently over the injured area. The swelling had gone down significantly, and though the limp remained, it was clear that Bella was on the mend. "You're doing good, little one," the farmer said softly, scratching Bella behind her ears. "You'll be back to running around in no time." Bella bleated happily, pressing her head into his hand. Charlie let out a low, rumbling hum as though echoing the farmer's approval. The farmer smiled, glancing up at the calf. "You've done a good job looking after her, Charlie. I don't know what she'd do without you." Charlie tilted his head, his dark eyes calm and steady, as though he understood exactly what the farmer was saying. The bond between the two animals had become something of a legend on the farm. Visitors who came to see the cows often stopped to watch Bella and Charlie, marveling at the unlikely friendship that had blossomed between them. Parents would point them out to their children, telling them stories about kindness and loyalty, and how even the smallest creatures could find strength in each other. "They're famous," the farmer joked one afternoon as he leaned against the fence, watching a family snap pictures of the two friends grazing side by side. "Maybe we ought to start charging admission." His wife laughed, swatting his arm playfully. "Oh hush, let them be. The world could use more stories like theirs." As the seasons began to change, the days grew shorter, and the air turned crisp with the promise of winter. The leaves on the trees transformed into brilliant shades of red, orange, and gold, carpeting the ground in a blanket of color. Bella and Charlie spent their days together as always, wandering through the fields and resting beneath the oak tree. But as the first frost settled over the farm, the farmer began to worry about Bella's small size and lingering injury. "She won't do well in the cold," he told his wife one evening as they sat by the fire. "She needs to stay warm, especially with that leg of hers." His wife nodded thoughtfully, knitting a scarf as she listened. "What about the barn? It's warm in there, and she'll have plenty of hay to keep her comfortable." The farmer rubbed his chin, considering her suggestion. "You're right. The barn's the safest place for her." "But what about Charlie?" his wife asked. "They'll be heartbroken if they're separated." The farmer smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Oh, don't worry about that. Wherever Bella goes, Charlie won't be far behind." That evening, the farmer led Bella into the barn, where a cozy bed of fresh hay awaited her. The barn was warm and quiet, the scent of hay and wood filling the air. Bella hesitated at first, her ears twitching as she looked around the unfamiliar space. But the farmer knelt beside her, scratching her gently behind the ears. "It's okay, little one," he said softly. "You'll be safe in here." Charlie, who had followed them to the barn, let out a low moo, his large frame blocking the doorway as though refusing to leave without her. The farmer chuckled, shaking his head. "I knew you wouldn't let her out of your sight," he said. "Come on, then. You can stay too." Charlie followed Bella into the barn, his heavy hoofs thudding softly against the wooden floor. He settled himself beside her, his large body curling protectively around her small frame as she nestled into the hay. The two of them lay together in the soft glow of the barn light, their breathing calm and steady. The farmer watched them for a moment, his heart swelling with warmth. "Good night, you two," he said softly, pulling the barn door closed behind him. The winter months were cold and quiet, but Bella and Charlie thrived in each other's company. The barn became their sanctuary, a place where they could escape the wind and snow that whipped across the fields. Bella's leg continued to heal, and Charlie grew stronger with each passing day, his once lonely spirit now filled with purpose. The farmer and his wife often visited the barn to check on them, bringing fresh hay and water and watching the pair with fond smiles. "They're like siblings," the wife would say, shaking her head in wonder. "It's amazing how much they've changed each other," the farmer agreed. "Sometimes animals are wiser than we are. They know what matters most." As the snow fell outside, blanketing the farm in white, Bella and Charlie lay together in the warmth of the barn, their bond unshakable. They had started as two abandoned souls, one injured and forgotten, the other orphaned and alone. But in finding each other, they had created something beautiful. Because sometimes, family isn't defined by blood. Sometimes, family is the one who stays by your side when the world feels cold and lonely. And for Bella and Charlie, that was all that mattered. The cold months of winter brought an air of stillness across the farm. The once green fields lay dormant beneath a blanket of white snow, and the crisp air carried the quiet creaks of frozen tree branches swaying in the wind. Life on the farm had slowed, but for Bella and Charlie, the barn had become their safe haven, a sanctuary where they could share warmth and companionship through the bitter cold. Every morning, the farmer would arrive at the barn with fresh hay and water, and every morning, he would find the same heartwarming sight. Bella would be curled up in the center of the hay pile, her small body nestled into a makeshift nest. Beside her, Charlie would be lying close, his large frame curled protectively around her as though shielding her from the chill. The two friends had become inseparable. The farmer often lingered longer than necessary, leaning on the barn door as he watched the pair in quiet awe. "Morning, you two," he would say with a soft smile, his voice gentle so as not to disturb their peace. Bella would lift her head, bleating softly in greeting, while Charlie would rumble his familiar, low hum, his way of saying hello. The farmer's wife had taken to bringing small treats for Bella, carrot pieces or slices of apple she'd saved from the kitchen. Bella's face would light up with joy, her tail wagging eagerly as she nibbled at the treats, while Charlie watched over her like an attentive guardian. The sight always brought a smile to the farmer's wife, who would reach out to scratch behind Charlie's ears. "You're a good boy," she would tell him softly. "You take care of her so well." One particularly frigid night, a fierce snowstorm swept across the farm. The wind howled through the cracks in the barn walls, rattling the wooden beams and sending chills through the air. Bella huddled close to Charlie, her small body shivering despite the thick hay surrounding her. Charlie, sensing her discomfort, shifted closer, draping his head gently across her back as though to provide extra warmth. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the barn, there was only the quiet sound of breathing, the steady rhythm of two lives intertwined. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, the farmer trudged through the snowdrifts toward the barn. He worried about Bella and Charlie, knowing how cold the night had been. But when he pushed open the heavy barn door, he was met with a sight that made his heart swell. Charlie was standing over Bella, his massive frame blocking the cold draft from the doorway. Bella sat at his feet, her head tilted upward as she gazed at him, her trust and affection unmistakable. The farmer shook his head with a chuckle, brushing snow from his coat. "You really are her protector, aren't you, boy?" Charlie let out a low, rumbling hum in response, while Bella bleated softly, as if agreeing. The farmer knelt down, inspecting Bella's leg, which had healed remarkably over the winter months. The limp was still there, but it no longer slowed her down the way it once had. "You're doing good, little one," he said warmly. "Stronger every day." He glanced up at Charlie, his voice softening. "And it's thanks to you, isn't it?" Charlie blinked slowly, his calm gaze steady and thoughtful. The farmer reached up to pat his side, his hand brushing against the coarse fur. "You saved her, you know," he said quietly. "In more ways than one." As winter began to melt into spring, the farm came alive once more. The snow gradually disappeared, replaced by green grass and tiny buds blooming on the trees. Birds returned to the skies, their songs filling the air with music, and the fields buzzed with the sounds of life waking up from its long slumber. Bella and Charlie took full advantage of the warmer weather. The two friends spent their days wandering the fields together, the golden sunlight warming their backs as they explored the pastures. Bella's limp had improved so much that she could almost keep up with Charlie as he moved, her steps lighter and more confident with each passing day. It was during one of these spring afternoons that Bella made a discovery that would change everything. The pair had wandered to a far corner of the pasture, where the grass grew tall and wild. Charlie was grazing nearby, his head lowered as he chewed contentedly, while Bella explored the edge of the fence, her small nose twitching as she sniffed at the ground. That's when she heard it, a faint, rustling sound coming from the tall grass. Bella froze, her ears perking up as she tilted her head to listen. The sound came again, softer this time, but unmistakable. Cautiously, Bella limped forward, pushing her way through the grass until she found the source of the noise. There, hidden in a small patch of clover, was a tiny kitten. The kitten was no more than a few weeks old, its fur matted and dirty, and its small body trembling with exhaustion. It looked up at Bella with wide, frightened eyes, letting out a weak mew that tugged at Bella's heart. Bella bleated softly, as though trying to reassure the kitten that she meant no harm. The kitten blinked slowly, its tiny body still trembling as it curled tighter into the grass. Hearing Bella's bleat, Charlie lifted his head and turned to see what was happening. When he spotted Bella standing over the tiny kitten, he let out a low, curious rumble and began making his way toward her. Bella stepped back slightly as Charlie approached, his massive frame towering over the small bundle of fur. The kitten let out another tiny mew, its voice barely audible, and Charlie tilted his head, his dark eyes soft and gentle. To Bella's surprise, Charlie lowered himself onto the ground, his massive body settling carefully beside the kitten. He let out a soft hum, his breath warm and steady, and the kitten's trembling began to subside as though comforted by his presence. Bella limped closer, nudging the kitten gently with her nose. The little creature let out a final, exhausted mew before curling into a ball between Bella and Charlie, its small body nestled into the safety of their combined warmth. For the first time since she had been abandoned, Bella felt as though her story had come full circle. She had once been small and helpless, lost and afraid in a world that seemed far too big for her. And now, standing beside Charlie, she had found the strength to care for another soul in need. Charlie seemed to sense it too. He watched Bella carefully as she settled beside the kitten, her body curled protectively around the tiny creature. He let out a low hum, as though approving of her actions, before resting his head on the grass and closing his eyes. Together, the three of them lay beneath the warm spring sun. A goat, a calf, and a kitten, united not by blood, but by something far more powerful, love. When the farmer found them later that afternoon, he stopped in his tracks, his mouth falling open in surprise. "Well, would you look at that?" he said softly, his voice filled with awe. His wife, who had followed him to the pasture, gasped as she spotted the kitten nestled between Bella and Charlie. "Where did that little thing come from?" The farmer shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. "I don't know, but it looks like they've adopted it." His wife laughed softly, her eyes shining with warmth. First Charlie saved Bella, and now Bella's saving the kitten. It's like a chain of kindness. The farmer knelt beside the trio, reaching out to scratch Charlie's head. "You're a good boy," he said quietly. "And you, Bella, you're a brave little thing." Bella bleated softly, lifting her head to look at him, while Charlie let out a low, contented hum. The kitten stirred slightly, its tiny body rising and falling with each breath, but it remained curled safely between them. The farmer looked back at his wife, his voice filled with wonder. "You were right, you know. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when you need them most." His wife nodded, her smile soft and knowing. And sometimes, the smallest hearts have the greatest strength. The farmer and his wife returned to the barn later that evening, bringing with them a small box lined with soft blankets for the kitten. They wanted to make sure the fragile creature had a safe place to rest and recover. But when they approached the trio, it became clear that separating the kitten from Bella and Charlie would not be easy. The kitten had nestled comfortably between Bella's small frame and Charlie's large body, its tiny head resting peacefully on Bella's side. Every now and then, it let out a contented purr, as though reassured by the warmth surrounding it. Bella watched over the kitten protectively, nudging it gently whenever it stirred, while Charlie lay still, his massive body a fortress of calm and security. The farmer crouched down, box in hand. "Come on, little one," he said softly, reaching out to pick up the kitten. Bella let out a sudden, sharp bleat, stepping in front of the kitten as though to block the farmer's hand. Charlie, sensing Bella's concern, lifted his head, his large brown eyes watching the farmer with quiet intensity. The farmer paused, his hand hovering in midair. He glanced at his wife, who stood behind him with an amused smile. "Looks like they don't want to give it up," she said with a chuckle. The farmer shook his head, his lips twitching into a smile. "Well, I suppose they know what they're doing. I've never seen animals care for each other like this." Relenting, he set the box aside and reached instead for a small bowl of warm milk, which he placed on the ground near Bella and Charlie. The kitten stirred at the smell, lifting its head groggily before letting out a tiny mew. Bella stepped back slightly, allowing the kitten to wobble forward and drink. "There you go," the farmer said softly, watching as the kitten lapped at the milk hungrily. "You're in good hands here, little one." As the days passed, the kitten grew stronger under Bella and Charlie's care. It began to follow Bella around the barn, its tiny paws pattering softly against the wooden floor as it trailed after the little goat. Bella, for her part, had taken on the role of a doting older sister, often pausing to look back and make sure the kitten was keeping up. Charlie, ever the guardian, watched over them both with quiet patience. Whenever the kitten grew tired or cold, it would return to Charlie's side, curling up against his warm fur as he rested in the hay. Charlie would lower his head protectively, his massive frame a shield against the world. The farmer and his wife were constantly amazed by the trio's bond. "It's like they've created their own little family," the wife said one evening as they stood at the barn door, watching Bella, Charlie, and the kitten curled up together in the hay. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" The farmer nodded, his voice soft with awe. "It's like they were meant to find each other, and in a way they were." Spring melted into summer, and life on the farm was busier than ever. The fields were alive with the vibrant green of tall grass and wildflowers, and the sounds of buzzing insects and chirping birds filled the air. Bella, Charlie, and the kitten, whom the farmer's wife had started calling Pip, spent their days exploring the pastures together, a trio that never strayed far from one another. Bella's limp had nearly disappeared, and though her movements were still more careful than before, she was stronger and more confident than ever. She would trot happily through the fields, her tail wagging and ears perked as she explored the world around her. Pip, now a healthy and energetic little kitten, followed Bella wherever she went. If Bella stopped to graze, Pip would pounce playfully at the grass around her, chasing shadows and batting at leaves with his tiny paws. His soft mews filled the air with a sense of joy and innocence, a sound that always made the farmer's wife smile. Charlie, as always, remained their gentle protector. He would graze alongside them, his massive frame a comforting presence as they roamed the fields. Whenever Pip wandered too far, Charlie would let out a low, rumbling sound that sent the kitten scampering back toward Bella's side. It was as though he had taken on the role of a watchful older brother, always ensuring their little family was safe. "They really are inseparable," the farmer remarked one afternoon as he leaned on the fence, watching the trio in the distance. "You'd think they were born to be together." His wife smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes the most unlikely friendships are the strongest ones. They found each other when they needed it most." One warm evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden light across the fields, something extraordinary happened. Bella, Charlie, and Pip were resting beneath the oak tree, their usual spot where they sought shade during the heat of the day. Bella lay stretched out in the grass, her eyes half closed as she rested, while Pip curled up beside her, his small body rising and falling with each soft breath. Charlie stood nearby, his head lowered as he grazed peacefully. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by a sharp, distant cry. Bella's ears perked up, and she lifted her head, her body tense as she listened. Charlie, too, froze, his gaze turning toward the edge of the pasture where the sound had come from. The cry came again, high-pitched and urgent, like the sound of a distressed animal. Bella bleated softly, glancing at Charlie as though waiting for him to decide what to do. Charlie let out a low, rumbling sound before turning toward the sound, his steps slow but purposeful. Bella followed close behind, with Pip scampering at her heels. They moved toward the far corner of the pasture, where the fence bordered a line of trees that marked the edge of the property. As they approached, they saw the source of the noise, a small, frightened bird that had become tangled in a patch of wire fencing. Its wings fluttered weakly as it cried out, its tiny body caught in the twisted metal. Bella bleated in alarm, her small hooves pawing at the ground as she watched the struggling bird. Charlie stepped closer, lowering his head to inspect the situation. The bird's cries grew quieter, its movements slowing as though it were growing too tired to fight. Charlie let out a deep hum, his large eyes filled with understanding as he turned to look at Bella. For a moment, it was as though they were silently communicating, sharing a wordless agreement that they needed to help. Bella stepped forward cautiously, her nose twitching as she sniffed at the wire. She nudged it gently with her head, trying to loosen it, but the wire was too strong. She bleated again, glancing up at Charlie for guidance. Charlie let out a soft rumble before lowering his head once more. With a slow, deliberate motion, he pressed his nose against the wire and began to pull. The metal creaked and groaned beneath his strength, the strands loosening little by little as he worked. Bella stood beside him, nudging the wire whenever it shifted, her small efforts helping to free the trapped bird. Pip watched from a distance, his wide eyes fixed on the scene as though understanding the gravity of the moment. Finally, after several tense minutes, the wire gave way with a sharp snap, and the bird tumbled free, landing in the grass with a soft flutter. It lay still for a moment, its tiny chest heaving as it recovered from the ordeal. Bella stepped closer, sniffing it gently, while Charlie stood watch, his massive form calm and steady. After a few moments, the bird lifted its head. Its wings fluttered once, then twice, before it pushed itself into the air with a burst of strength. Bella watched in awe as the bird soared upward, its small form silhouetted against the golden light of the setting sun. Charlie let out a low hum, his head lifting as he watched the bird disappear into the distance. Bella bleated softly, her tail wagging as though proud of what they had accomplished together. Pip trotted over to Bella, pressing his small body against her side as if to share in the moment. The three of them stood together beneath the oak tree, bathed in the warm glow of the evening sun. In that moment, it was clear that their bond went beyond friendship. They were a family that had grown stronger through every challenge they had faced together. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the golden light gave way to deep shades of purple and blue. Bella, Charlie, and Pip lingered beneath the oak tree, their silhouettes a quiet testament to the bond they shared. As the sky darkened and the first stars began to twinkle, they slowly made their way back to the barn, their steps steady and unhurried. Inside the barn, the farmer and his wife had prepared a fresh bed of hay, along with bowls of water and food. The moment the trio stepped through the doors, they each settled into their familiar places. Bella curled up in the center of the hay, Pip tucked close beside her, and Charlie lying protectively nearby, his broad frame surrounding them like a gentle wall of safety. The farmer stood in the doorway, watching them with a mix of pride and quiet wonder. "There's something special, those three," he said softly. His wife, who stood beside him, nodded. "They've created their own little family. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it." The farmer smiled faintly, leaning against the doorframe as he spoke. "It's funny, isn't it? They're so different, a goat, a calf, and a kitten. And yet, they understand each other better than most people ever could." His wife rested her head on his shoulder, her voice thoughtful. "Maybe that's the lesson. It doesn't matter what we look like, where we come from, or what makes us different. Sometimes, all it takes to heal is someone who's willing to stand by your side." The farmer nodded, his gaze lingering on the peaceful trio. They've certainly proven that. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Bella, Charlie, and Pip became legends on the farm. Visitors would come from nearby towns to hear their story, marveling at the unlikely trio who had formed an unbreakable bond. Children would giggle with delight as Pip chased butterflies through the grass. Bella trotted happily alongside Charlie, and the gentle calf kept watch over them both. "They're like a storybook come to life," one visitor remarked, snapping photos as Bella, Charlie, and Pip grazed together in the sunlit pasture. The farmer would smile proudly, shaking his head. "There's something else, all right. 3 little miracles, if you ask me." The trio brought joy not only to the farm but to everyone who heard their story. Newspapers ran headlines about the unlikely family, and people from all walks of life found inspiration in their tale. Some saw it as a reminder that love could overcome differences, while others marveled at the way kindness had transformed 3 lonely creatures into a family. But for Bella, Charlie, and Pip, life remained simple. They didn't understand the fuss surrounding them, nor did they care. All they needed was each other. As the seasons changed, the farm blossomed with new life. Spring brought the birth of several calves, and Bella, Charlie, and Pip quickly found themselves surrounded by curious new faces. The young calves, playful and energetic, would gather around Charlie, their small heads bumping against his broad shoulders as they explored their world. Charlie, ever the gentle giant, watched over them patiently, his calm presence reassuring to the excitable newcomers. Bella, too, found herself with newfound responsibilities. The calves were curious about the little goat who had become their honorary sister, and they often followed her around the pasture, bleating happily as they trotted after her. Bella, now stronger and more confident than ever, led them with pride, her limp barely noticeable as she moved through the fields. And Pip, the mischievous little kitten who had once been so fragile and afraid, became the ringleader of the group. He darted between the calves' legs, pounced playfully at Bella's hooves, and often perched on Charlie's back, his tiny body a stark contrast to the massive calf beneath him. His playful energy brought laughter to the farm, and his bond with Bella and Charlie remained as strong as ever. "They've become the heart of this farm," the farmer said one evening as he stood by the fence, watching the trio and their new friends graze beneath the setting sun. His wife smiled, resting her hands on the fence beside him. "It's amazing how far they've come. Bella was so fragile when we found her, and now look at her, leading the herd like she was born to do it." The farmer nodded, his voice filled with warmth. "And Charlie, he's grown into a protector, just like his mother would have wanted. And that little kitten, well, he's brought life and laughter to everyone." His wife chuckled softly. "They've given us something too, you know. They remind us that family comes in all forms, and love isn't bound by what's expected or ordinary." The farmer wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his gaze soft as he watched the trio. "You're right. It's a lesson we could all stand to learn." As the years passed, Bella, Charlie, and Pip continued to share their lives together. The bond they had formed as young and vulnerable animals only grew stronger with time, and their story became one that people passed down like a cherished tale. Children who visited the farm would listen wide-eyed as the farmer told them about the goat who had been abandoned, the calf who had lost his mother, and the kitten who had been found in the grass. They would watch with delight as the now-grown Bella and Charlie roamed the fields together, with Pip, a sleek and confident cat, perched comfortably on Charlie's back. The farm itself became a symbol of kindness and compassion, a place where animals of all kinds could find safety and love. The farmer and his wife welcomed more rescues over the years: injured animals, abandoned strays, and those who needed a second chance. And each time, they thought of Bella, Charlie, and Pip, the trio who had shown them that the simplest acts of kindness could change everything. "They taught us how to care," the farmer would say to visitors, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Those three little souls reminded us that love has no boundaries. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you've been through. What matters is showing up for each other when it counts." One warm summer evening, as the sun sank low over the hills, Bella, Charlie, and Pip lay together beneath the oak tree that had become their home. The air was filled with the soft hum of crickets and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Bella, her once injured legs strong and steady, rested comfortably in the grass, her head lifted as she watched the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Pip, now a sleek and confident cat, lay curled beside her, his purrs soft and steady as he napped. And Charlie, the gentle giant who had once been so lonely, stood tall beside them, his calm gaze sweeping over the farm as though ensuring that all was well. In that quiet moment, there was nothing but peace. The three friends, so different yet so connected, had found something that many search for their whole lives: family. They had taught each other what it meant to trust, to care, and to love without condition. And though the world around them continued to change, their bond remained unshakable. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Bella let out a soft, contented bleat, her voice carrying across the field like a song of gratitude. Charlie responded with a low, rumbling hum, his massive head dipping down as he nuzzled her gently. Pip opened one eye, stretched his paws, and let out a tiny, sleepy mew before settling back into the grass. Together, they watched the stars appear one by one, their presence a quiet reminder of the love that had brought them together. For in the heart of that little farm, beneath the shelter of an old oak tree, a goat, a calf, and a kitten had proven that family is not defined by blood or species. It is defined by love, loyalty, and the simple act of showing up for one another. And in that, they had found everything they would ever need.